Welcome to the Nerd Party.
Hello and welcome to the A24 project here on the Nerd Party Network. We make our way through the A24 filmography and along the way bring you interviews with the talent involved in front of and behind the camera. In this episode we finally review Marcel the Shell with Shoes On, and joining me as ever is Rotten Tomatoes accredited critic Dallas King. Dallas, welcome back.
Certified fresh.
You uploaded like 250 reviews sort of over the weekend. How many of them were A24 reviews? Do you notice a trend? Are they going rotten or are they going fresh?
Actually, I'm not sure how many I've actually reviewed, because that would be on Rotten Tomatoes. Obviously, I've reviewed every single A24 film on the podcast, but sometimes I don't always get to review them actually for websites. Certainly, like the early films and stuff like that wouldn't be on there. I mean, there was definitely Lighthouse, Uncut Gems, Bodies. There's a fair amount. But yeah, a lot of the time, yeah, I'd always, they'd always screen in London before I started getting on the lists and stuff like that. There's definitely a fair amount there, and certainly the ones that I did review are probably more towards the 4 or 5 stars. The early period of A24 where there was a few 1-star stinkers in there. Yeah, no, that was before technically I started reviewing films, so they don't appear on my resume.
Well, one we can kind of dive into today is Marcel the Shell with Shoes On. So this has been one of these ones with that kind of recent trend of sort of A24 movies where they're like, oh, they've done really well in America. Why? When are they coming here? They've not been at any film festivals here.
Park Circus, rather, boastingly on Twitter, shouted about the fact that they've secured a deal for Australia and New Zealand distribution, and it's like, but what about the UK? What about us over here, man? I mean, it's like,
that's so bizarre.
Yeah, it looked like the Park Circus UK account as well that did it, and it's just like, hello? People want to see a shell. We like shells over here. We sell seashells on the seashore.
Yeah, that is very bizarre. Yeah, I'm a bit confused about that one, because I guess me and you thought when the sort of A24 ahead of time were like, you know what, we're going to distribute our own film in the UK.
Ah, yes, the Thanos moment. Fine, I'm going to do it myself. And then
they've not really done anything since.
Yeah, and actually, do you know one of the most annoying things? Well, I think it's great that they finally jumped across the pond and released Everything Everywhere All at Once in cinemas. Because they released it, it doesn't have a Blu-ray release in the UK, and I want it on Blu-ray. I mean, I can apparently watch it on Prime anytime I want, but I don't want it. I want it on Blu-ray because it's one of those 5-star films. I'd like to have it on the option to have it on Blu-ray. So I might just have to get it in America and hope it's not region locked when I'm over in.
There's always Germany. Germany's always good for cheap region.
Oh, of course, yes.
Imports,
no, I might have to go. Yeah, I'll have to go down the European route. Just have to make sure the subtitles are all right.
Yeah. So Marcel the Shell with Shoes On, we finally were one of these ones, and we're going to have to do it with a bunch of films coming up soon. Rented this one from American iTunes, so definitely behind the curve on this one. But for those not familiar with Marcel the Shell with Shoes On, Marcel is a 1-inch tall shell who ekes out a colourful existence with his grandmother Connie and their pet lint Alan. Once part of a sprawling community of shells, they now live alone as the sole survivors of a mysterious tragedy. But when a documentary filmmaker discovers them amongst the clutter of his Airbnb, the short film he posts online brings Marcel millions of passionate fans, as well as unprecedented dangers and a new hope at finding his long-lost family. So Dallas, how familiar were you with Marcel the Shell? Because the character began all the way back in 2010 as a short movie. There was also called Marcel the Shell with Shoes On. There was the sequel Marcel the Shell with Shoes On 2, and that was 2011, and then there was a third film, Marcel the Shell with Shoes On 3, in 2014. So directed and featuring Dean, the actor who plays Dean in the film, Dean Fletcher Camp, and co-written and voiced by Jenny Slate. So Jenny Slate, I think, is maybe moved into the most frequent A24 female actor, with Everything Everywhere All at Once this year, Marcel the Shell with Shoes On, and On the Rocks, An Obvious Child. You're better with that statistic than mine. Is she kind of overtaken as Elle Fanning at this stage?
Oh, I will have to. I'll have to run the numbers. I will get back to you later on that. But yeah, no, that could be. Because some people say, oh well, it's a voiceover. Does it count? So I mean, I will run the numbers, and I'll get back to you on that. But yes, no, she could be. She's definitely rising up the charts there. So yeah, we will find out. But yeah, no, I was not familiar with Marcel the Shell with shoes on or without shoes on, but he's technically already always had shoes on. Until the film sort of was released earlier this year, and I was aware that it was based on some shorts, but I'd sort of held off watching them until I'd sort of seen the film itself, which I did over the weekend, and then I went back and watched some of the original shorts, and sort of watching the film, I could see where it was sort of reworked some of the short elements, I guess, into the feature, and I really liked sort of the way that it's incorporated the fan base, so and I like the way that it did that as well. But it just seemed like a really sort of sweet animation sort of style that was being used, and I believe just this week it has been confirmed that there might have been some question marks over. So it has some live action elements and stuff like that, but apparently it will qualify for competing in the best animated feature campaign for the Oscars. So we were talking, I think last week about Pearl and in the A24 news about A24's Oscar hopes for certain films. I guess they've now got another campaign to run if they think they want to go for the best animated feature Oscar. I believe the front runner at the moment is going to be Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio, but I think this certainly has a good shout as well.
It's quite an interesting one because I was reading up on that. So they were kind of confused. They weren't too sure with would it be eligible for, say, best animated feature or sort of just general best picture. And he kind of David Fleischer Camp sort of came out and went, in order to be considered, he and A24 will have to submit documentation to prove that it has met the requirements in which animation must figure in no less than 75% of the picture's running time. In addition, a narrative animated film must have a significant number of characters animated. So on November 9th, so not too long ago, the Academy of Motion Pictures, Arts and Science officially deemed the film eligible for consideration in the animated feature category. So yeah, I wasn't too sure of those kind of statistics and markers to be eligible, but yeah, that I think it certainly stands a chance of being nominated and potentially winning.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think there was. I think was this sort of one of the ones that scuppered the Lego movie actually a while ago. I know it was a massive outcry when I think it didn't get featured in that because obviously there's a lot of sort of live action sequences, and I guess they want to make sure that if an animated film it is animated, but there is there's a trend at the moment for this sort of cross pollination of genres where you've got this mixture of live action and I mean technically was it that percentage? I mean, would Who Framed Roger Rabbit have counted as an animated feature if it was using those numbers? I don't know. Perhaps you could retcon it that way, but I'm glad that it has made the cut. And yes, Jenny Slate is indeed now tied with Riley Keough and Elle Fanning at 4. So if they do a sequel where Marcel with shoes on perhaps runs the New York Marathon or something, then potentially that could bump her up into first place.
So kind of what was your expectation going in? I purposely decided I wasn't going to watch the shorts before watching the film and kind of decided to go in as blind as possible. I hadn't seen the trailer. I think I'd seen more of sort of the A24 Instagram account posting the little Marcel the Shells with shoes on, little figures than sort of anything else from the film. I was sort of just waiting to get my chance to see it. How did you approach it? Did you watch the shorts first, watch the shorts afterwards, or not at all? And what was your kind of reaction to the film?
Yeah, no, I decided to watch them after I felt I should, because I wasn't sure how. I just wanted to see the film first and see that vision because I wasn't sure if, from what I sort of gathered from the synopsis, and I think I did see the trailer once. I didn't think it was it seemed like you could watch it without having seen the short, so I figured I'd do it that way and then go back and watch it. And now there is some sort of elements which are clearly drawn from it. It seems like a new take on it and a feature one where it's setting up the story of this guy moving into an Airbnb, and I've seen two films this year set in Airbnbs, and this is the nicer one, I can tell you. Barbarian will put you off, renting an Airbnb forever, but this one you might want to rent an Airbnb in case you find an adorable little shell who wants to be your friend. And I was really taken with the style of it. I like the sort of the full sort of documentary aspect of it. I thought Marcel was a very sort of cute character, a lovely sort of outlook on the world. I thought Isabella Rossellini was terrific as the grandmother. I mean, I'm not entirely sure how the sort of family system works in terms of sort of shells. I know like hermit crabs, they'll go in a shell and then they'll try and when they get too big, they'll move out once they find another shell and stuff. So, it's what exactly is inside the shell is still slightly up for debate for me. But I was thoroughly charmed by the whole thing, has to be said.
I must admit, I was on the opposite side to this one. I think
too twee?
It's one of the a little too twee for my liking. It was one of those ones. I think I probably would have liked the shorts a little bit better, to be honest. Like I think they're about 10 minutes, maybe 15 minutes at most. That's maybe the right amount for me of the character of Marcel. I really just didn't think I was the audience for this. And then I was kind of looking at my Letterboxd and other sorts of things, and it feels like a lot of people my age and demographic kind of really bought into the film, but I couldn't help but kind of walking away going, this one's maybe not for me. And with so many A24 films, not every film needs to be edited. It doesn't need to be edited at the millennial generation or Gen Z all the time. And I like that this is, for me, I felt like this was a really good young person's film where it kind of takes on some interesting kind of themes about sort of death and kind of dealing with things like that and found families and lost families, all really good themes that people like Pixar have been kind of dominating for years, but this does it in quite an interesting way. But did you sort of feel that the tone kind of blended maybe like family movie with something that could also have that kind of universal appeal? I mean, I did pick up there was a really good pubic hair joke that would definitely be for the adult audiences and less so the kids ones. How did you sort of feel that this kind of handled it?
Yeah, no, I mean, the most successful, I think, family films have a couple of jokes. I think Shrek and Shrek 2 always spring to mind as something for the adults, something for the adults to enjoy while they're taking their kids to it. And, A24 has not been known for its family output. And, as you say, they try to hit as many demographics as possible. And now, they found something which they clearly saw the shorts. Someone enjoyed the shorts and decided we want to back that to make a feature. I mean, I'd probably agree with you. I think the 90-minute runtime is maybe slightly too long for the sort of message and journey that the character goes on. But I mean, it does, like I say, it does deal with some interesting themes about death and sort of finding your family, losing one's family, what makes a home and stuff like that. Actually, that's a bit universal theme. It's like, trying to get back to your family. You've got like Homeward Bound, you've got your Finding Nemos and stuff like that. There's loads of family films that have done that. And, this one, it did it well. I like the use of the full documentary style of it. I like the fact that it brought in clearly the pre-existing fan base from the shorts via the sort of the YouTube element and sort of going on sort of 60 minutes and all that to try and find the family. I did like that story. I mean, it's definitely say a younger sort of audience level, but I was still sort of charmed on for the most part by it. I thought it was a very, very sweet film, but I guess it depends on your tolerance for it. It depends how big a sweet tooth you've got, perhaps. After too much of a good thing can sometimes then you might find it a bit cloying.
Yeah, the 60 minutes aspect was a part that I think I didn't really work well for me. It kind of fell into that trap, and I think it kind of did with like when they had sort of Conan O'Brien and other sort of celebrities kind of talking about Marcel and his kind of popularity by like going by doing that annoying trend of like, I'm going to explain the big themes of the movie to you, the audience, because you're too dumb to pick up on it. Like, like Marcel the Shell, all these lovely things about him, and reason going like, well, I see that already. I just don't need you to tell me that. And that whole kind of thing felt really just on the nose. But there was a line that an aspect of it that I thought was pretty great, where it's like it was kind of talking about sort of almost talking about sort of the function of sort of documentary kind of filmmaking, and I suppose on a kind of wider level where you see it with like Marcel, like he's so annoyed at kind of Dean about sort of like that he's attempting this kind of distance from his subject, and that he's kind of not actually helping by sort of being distant, that you're almost benefiting from this kind of character's experience, both good and bad, but you're not willing to kind of help or intervene in so much. I thought it was kind of an interesting discussion about sort of documentary ethics, that he was kind of like, as this little shell, there's a lot of things that he just doesn't need, and that he's trying to get that little bit of help, and that's something that we can kind of, I guess we've all gone through before, where we're like, we want help from people. We don't want to just be seen or recognized. We actually need that sort of helping hand and experience, which I thought was quite a good sort of theme to pick up on, in addition to sort of this dealing with death, which I think would definitely have packed more of a punch with a younger audience, whereas perhaps this one, where we see how badly the state is neglecting people at the moment, that and documentary kind of ethics seem to kind of blur together quite well.
Yeah, no, because I mean, certainly at the start of the film, it feels like Dean is speaking to Marcel and sort of filming Marcel as like well, I sort of make films, so I thought this would be quite cool to just film this little guy, see where it goes. But then obviously, once the YouTube hits start rolling in, you do feel like there is potentially a bit of exploitation. It's like, well, if the mystery of if we find his family too quickly, then it's all going to be over. So how do we keep that going? And then also he's the one who's pushing, potentially manipulating Marcel to go on 60 Minutes and continue the story, because Marcel's like very adamant that at one point he finds the attention too much. It's having an adverse effect on his granny's health. It's weird that even actually just talking about it this way, given the fact that they're just shells. But they do have a very sort of human quality to them, and there's a characterization of them great. So you do think of them as characters. So yeah, the granny's not doing well, and he thinks any more further exposure to this media limelight could be detrimental. But Dean sort of keeps sort of pushing on. Oh, but no, but it's the only way to find your family and stuff like that. So yeah, no, you have got this sort of where does the role of a documentary filmmaker in trying to help a character or tell the story, where the lines are certainly blurred there. It sort of reminds me of an episode of, I think it was it Blue Planet, or yeah, I think it was Blue Planet. That was it, with David Attenborough, where the moral of these nature documentaries is you do not interfere with the law of nature. It's terrible when you see a cute little animal get ripped to pieces by a bigger animal, but that is the law of nature and stuff. But there was one episode where there was some penguins who basically they were in like this sort of ice hole, but basically something had happened and their only means of escape had it crumbled away, so they were not able to get out. And then it was basically the team decided they had to do something, so they went in and basically dug like a ramp for them to be able to get out. And that's they did debate back and forth about whether or not they should do this, and because it would have just been heartbreaking to just watch all those animals die when you knew that you could have done something. So I think it does sort of dive into that element of how much of yourself do you put into a documentary. Obviously, you've got some people who remain very distant, completely removed from the subject, or you've got the opposite end of, say, someone like Michael Moore, who is, well, it's a Michael Moore show, and I'm going to be in front of the camera at all times, talking to people and stuff like that. So I did think it found a good balance, but yeah, it does sort of dive into the ethics of documentary filmmaking, and yeah, I think it does ask some good questions from that respect.
One thing I'm curious about, sort of with like Marcel, is we kind of see it a little bit with kind of he becomes this famous person on TikTok, YouTube, and so on, and he's kind of realizes they're not actually like kind of friends or this community. They're just like sort of comments and so on. And I was wondering about sort of the popularity of this character, and does it in this world potentially become something where it gets forgotten about or overlooked. And I was wondering about, for example, like Paddington. Everyone loved those first two films, and then no one would shut up about Paddington. So much so that I think with anyone in the UK that's experienced the Queen's death coverage of like memes of her and Paddington together, Paddington walking her kind of to heaven and so on. Do you could you see sort of Marcel the Shell going the way of Paddington and us kind of having fatigue with the character?
I don't think until I was completely removed from the phenomenon, I was not aware of the character, so it hadn't sort of seeped through to my particular branch of film Twitter in the years that had led up to the movie. So I guess it depends how they play it now. I mean, I will admit that yes, I have bought the Marcel Shell hard metal figure from the A24 shop. I was getting a couple of things, and it came on. I was like, yeah, no, I want. It said it makes a very good paperweight, so I figured, yeah, no, I'm going to have that on my new office desk. So yeah, why not? It was cute enough for me to make that purchase. I won't be getting a tattoo or anything like that. I don't have any tattoos. I've always felt that I would worry that I'd put something on and then I'd realize that, like you say, that kind of the fad ends and then you're like left with this and you're like, why did I get that in the first place? I think the Blade Runner origami unicorn is the only thing I've ever really sort of considered. But yeah, even then, no, that's not going to happen. So I think it depends how much they push it. I mean, I expect there could be more Marcel coming. I mean, we could get a Marcel for your consideration ad campaign, which could be quite fun. If I mean, I imagine it, given the animation style, it could take quite a while to produce videos like that. They might not have enough time to do a series of that. I mean, I don't know how quickly Dean is able to produce that kind of thing. I certainly wouldn't want it to go down the route of a CGI Marcel. I think it has to be the original Shell. So that could be fun. But yeah, no, I mean it just depends if Marcel starts appearing in other TV shows or does like uh sort of like marketing campaigns with brands and stuff like that. Because I think the Paddington thing, I think it was like because was it the Queen's Jubilee? So that was about 3 months before death. She did a completely unexpected surprise video where she had afternoon tea with Paddington. And then, that seemed to become the thing that people latched onto and would leave marmalade sandwiches in the park and outside Buckingham Palace and leave little Paddington dolls. She'd been alive for 96 years. She'd done so many things. I didn't see anyone leaving any sort of, Daniel Craig merchandise outside the Buckingham Palace for the time that she jumped out of a helicopter and skydived into the Olympic Stadium. Where was that stuff? So, yeah, no, I think they have to be careful not to overplay their hand and create a situation where people get sick of Marcel. We're not there yet, and I think he's got a lot of wiggle room yet, but yeah, it depends. I think it makes, like you said, I think it makes a really good sort of YouTube series, but I'm not sure if the character can withstand a lot of movies. I mean, the next movie, if they did do another movie, obviously it would be that Marcel gets removed from the house and ends up across country and then has to make his way back home while visiting all the big sites like Mount Rushmore, the Grand Canyon, New York, Times Square, all that kind of thing. That's obviously where that's going to be. But how would you still do it in a documentary style, or would you go full blown, just sort of family film sort of thing? It's yeah, there's movement for the character, but yeah, you've got to be careful not to overdo it. But who knows? Maybe Marcel the Shell with shoes on is now Pedro Pascal and Nicolas Cage's new favorite film.
The joy of A24 is we are going to go into something wildly different in our next film review. So next week you'll get a break from both of us, and we'll be welcoming Sally Messam.
Oh no, it's a fair trade.
Yeah, exactly. You know, we will talk about After Sun, but I admit I really wanted to get her on to really dive into the making of Our Ladies, one of my favourite films of the past few years, and a little bit of After Sun as well. But we'll be back again in 2 weeks' time to discuss God's Creatures, starring former guest on the show Paul Mescal, as he returns home to Ireland, and we discover the joy of oyster fishing. So that's definitely something very different. Again, shells, crustaceans, we're on a bit of a run with that just now. Googly eyes and crustaceans is the A24 theme for 2022.
A shocking good time.